Emergency Coordinator. I'd like to start this afternoon's session with acknowledging the Wurundjeri Wurrung people as the traditional owners and true sovereigns of the land which we know as Yarra. And we'd like to acknowledge too the significant contributions made by other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to the life in Yarra. We pay our respects to elders from all nations and to their elders past, present and future, including the elders from whichever lands that you might be dialing in from this afternoon. So before we get started, we'll just cover off on a little bit of housekeeping. There's only a few little bits and pieces. So firstly, please keep your microphones on mute. This will allow there to be no background noise or distractions for our speakers. So yeah, please keep on mute. The other thing is there'll be an opportunity to ask questions of our speakers, and we ask that if you've got any questions, you pop them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you look, so please put all of your questions for all of the speakers in that part there. Please don't pop them in the chat. We'll only be taking questions from the Q&A function. With that, I'd like to introduce this afternoon's speakers. Some of you may know that as I said, we're talking about community batteries, including the community battery trial in the City of Yarra. And there are several partners in that program: the Yarra Energy Foundation, the Australian National University, City Power, and Yarra City Council. So our speakers and some of our guests, which I'll introduce as well, are all representing those organisations. So our speakers, first of all, we have Tim Xu. Tim is the Communications and Marketing Manager at the Yarra Energy Foundation. We have Chris Wallen, who's the Project Manager of the Community Batteries section at Yarra Energy Foundation. We have Kieran Price, the Senior Project Officer, Energy Programs at the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. We've got some special guests as well. We have Greg Hannon, who's the Head of Network Strategy and Non-Network Solutions with City Power. And I think we'll have Jenny Suan and Joanna Cooney, both from City Power as well, and both in the stakeholder and engagement, community engagement section. And then from the Australian National University's Battery Storage and Grid Integration Program, we have Hedda Ranson Cooper, who's our social science lead there. Who's the social science lead there. So with that, I think I'll hand over to Tim, who's the first speaker, and yeah, we'll get the afternoon underway. Thanks, Tim, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Sam, and hi, everyone. My name is Tim. I'm the Comms and Marketing Manager at the Yarra Energy Foundation. And for those of you who aren't familiar with us, YEF is a not-for-profit based in the City of Yarra, and we receive our core funding from Yarra City Council. And our vision is for net zero emissions from energy sources in Yarra by 2030. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction to community batteries, and I'll also summarize some of the key challenges that the electricity system is facing and explain at a pretty high level how community batteries can help address some of these challenges. But before I get into that, I do want to acknowledge the partners that are involved in the Yarra Community Battery Trial and emphasize very much that this is a collaborative effort between us, Yarra City Council, the Battery Storage and Grid Integration Program, also known as BizGIP from the Australian National University, and City Power, and that this trial is being funded by the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning through their neighbourhood battery initiative. And yeah, so glad to see so many people out here on this Saturday afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. So what is a community battery? There are sort of 5 main points I wanted to cover here. First, you can think of it like a giant power bank. So it helps us to store excess renewable energy during the day, and then can release that energy during times of peak demand, often during the evenings. In terms of size, it depends on the hardware, but it can range from anything from about the size of a wardrobe to a shipping container. A community battery is a battery that is connected to the grid. It is also suited to a neighbourhood setting. So it's something which is designed to service up to about 200 homes, depending on the size that you go for. And with our definition of a community battery, we really believe that a community battery should benefit everyone, including those who may be renting and those who perhaps don't own their own home, and including those who are unable or who don't have solar PV on their roofs. In terms of the problems that community batteries solve, these are some of the top 5 for the community. The first is solar waste. That is wasted renewable energy that is not captured or used. At the moment, this is actually happening quite a lot due to constraints in the network and congestion. So a battery would help absorb some of that excess renewable energy. The second one is inequity. So we know that not everybody has the same ability to install solar or access renewable energy. And a battery would help us to redistribute renewable energy within a local area and hopefully improve accessibility for everyone, again, including tenants and those who may not have their own rooftop solar. The third challenge is export limiting. So a community battery would actually enable more solar to be added to the grid. And it would enable more solar energy to be exported to the grid. So that would do a few things, including increasing or improving the payback times on solar installations. And it would obviously increase the supply of local renewable energy that's in the grid that people could therefore use. The fourth point here is that we do anticipate community batteries would reduce the cost of electricity. And in simple terms, with more local supply of renewable energy, with demand staying the same, prices should go down. It's a bit more complex than that, and Chris might be able to get into some more details. But we do anticipate community batteries will improve affordability of electricity, which is very important. And fifth, batteries are expensive. So individual household batteries are a bit prohibitive in their cost at the moment. So cost sharing through a neighbourhood scale battery would allow us to leverage economies of scale and streamline costs for managing, maintaining, operating the battery. And it also wouldn't take up space on your property. And if you're thinking about community batteries, we like to think of community batteries as solar sponges. So that's a handy little way to just try and think of what their function is in a nutshell, absorbing renewable energy, and then when you squeeze them, releasing it when we need it most. So another common question we get is, what does it look like? So our battery hasn't been decided yet, but this is an example from Beacon Hill in New South Wales. You can see here it's taller than a person, maybe the size of a large four-wheel drive. This one in particular is located in a small park, and it only services solar customers or those who are about to install solar. So I just wanted to explain, and we will explain, that that is quite different in terms of function to the Yarra Community Battery Trial in terms of what we're looking to get from our model. So community batteries are actually popping up all across Australia at the moment, and they're generating a lot of interest and a lot of excitement at YEF about them too. But they are not all the same. So there are a lot of things that we still need to learn before we can transition from sort of what we're in now, which is kind of our piloting phase, to rolling out community batteries that can stand on their own feet. And we hope that we'll be able to do that in the future. And Chris will explain a bit more about what we hope to achieve with the trial itself and some of the main challenges that we still need to overcome to make a sustainable, an equitable, and a cost-effective solution to help our community reach net zero carbon. So if you're wondering how you can be involved, you absolutely can. At the moment, we have a very short survey out, and thank you very, very much to everybody who has completed that survey so far. We've had a bit over 250 responses just in the last couple of weeks, which is absolutely outstanding. All of those responses have been helping us improve our frequently asked questions and information on our website, which I've been updating regularly this week. So everything that comes through the survey, we're reading, we're digesting, And yeah, we really appreciate it if you had 3 minutes to contribute your thoughts, because that will help us to shape how this community battery comes together. You can visit our website if you're looking for more information. And I've tried to put up as much information there as we have at the moment, which I hope will answer some of those early questions. But what's even more exciting is the Victorian government has taken quite an interest in neighbourhood scale batteries. And we're very lucky today to have Kieran Price from the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning with us today to talk a little bit more about their neighbourhood battery initiative. So thank you very much for joining us, Kieran. I'll hand over to you.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Tim. I'll just try and get my presentation up here. Does that come through for you guys? Wonderful, thanks. So yeah, my name's Kieran Price. I'm here to talk to you about the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative. The Neighbourhood Battery Initiative was launched on the 24th of February this year by the Minister for Energy and Solar Homes, with $3 million of funding available. And the NBI aims to support a diverse pipeline of neighbourhood scale battery projects through 2 streams of funding. Stream 1 provides funding for a range of scoping, feasibility and business case developments, while Stream 2 provides support for the installation of neighbourhood battery projects that are well progressed in their planning and getting close to shovel ready. The ultimate aim of the NBI is to help us understand the role that neighbourhood batteries can play in Victoria's energy transition. The program is designed to inform our thinking on the longer term policy settings that will enable neighbourhood batteries to be deployed where they can provide the most value to customers, communities and their electricity system. The NBI's funding is part of a broader $10.92 million neighbourhood battery workstream. So far, this has included the production of a consultation paper looking into the opportunities and challenges associated with neighbourhood scale batteries and the role that they can play in Victoria's energy transition. And after receiving significant level of feedback from the public, including over 300 responses to the community survey, DELP are currently working on a consultation summary report to be released later this year. And we also have a really strong focus on information and knowledge sharing for our successful NBI projects, and are currently considering how we can best facilitate that knowledge sharing between the projects and trials, as well as with the broader sector and community members. We're really keen that the lessons that we learn from these initial projects and from our ongoing consultation processes inform our future policy decisions. We did receive a really high number of applications for the NBI, and the locations of the proposed projects and the trials are shown on the map here. This is the first support for neighbourhood batteries that we've had in Victoria of this sort of nature, and we really weren't sure what level of work had been undergone in the community to this point. We weren't sure what number of applications we were going to receive and what quality they would be, but we were really happy with the 33 applications that we did receive. As you can see, there's a good spread across the state, both metro and regional, and applications came from a really broad range of organisations, which goes back to our objective to test out different ownership and operational models of neighbourhood batteries to learn the benefits that they can deliver. So we were really pleased with the range of applications that we received. And just a couple of weeks ago, the Minister announced the 16 successful projects that have received funding through the NBI. Due to the number of really impressive projects that applied, we ended up awarding a total of up to $3.68 million, with 13 successful Stream 1 projects and 3 successful Stream 2 projects. Here's a quick tour of some of the successful projects that did receive grant funding through the NBI. The lead applicants included community energy groups, local councils, greenhouse alliances, distribution businesses, a retailer, and a few other organisations. And underpinning these lead organisations are a range of diverse project partnerships, which we've attempted to capture in this table here. As you can see, the applications were really mixed. Partnerships between local governments, greenhouse alliances and community energy groups were represented in almost all of our projects, with diverse technology, platform and data providers, as well as universities being involved in a number of projects as well. Well, in terms of the 13 successful Stream 1 projects, this is a list of them and their locations across the state. While the vast majority of the applications that we received across the board were really impressive, I think the key thing that really separated these successful projects from the unsuccessful ones was the level of engagement that they'd undertaken with both the local community and the local distribution network, which made it much, much easier for them to outline the potential benefits that their projects would deliver. In terms of these Stream 1 projects, I won't go through them all individually, but I'll just note how diverse they are. They cover a really vast range of settings and focus on issues from engineering studies to town planning processes to mapping hosting capacity and service limitation to research and innovative energy trading models and addressing solar export constraints. And we're hoping that where these projects prove to be viable, they'll create a pipeline for further trials and neighbourhood battery installations in Victoria across these many different settings. In terms of the successful Stream 2 projects that have received funding through the NBI, the first one is the Yarra Energy Foundation's project in collaboration with City Power and ANU. And I won't say much more about this because you'll hear all about it in the next presentation from Chris. The second successful project is led by Powercore in partnership with Wyndham City Council, Simply Energy and the Western Alliance for Greenhouse Action. This project is to develop a neighbourhood battery in the suburb of Tarneet, and this is a really exciting project. The Tarneet postcode has by far the highest number of solar installations in Victoria, with around 14,000 or about 42% of households in the postcode. And this battery will help to generate more solar generation, potentially up to 120,000 kilowatt hours a year. It'll manage peak demand and it will provide customers with access to new virtual storage products, which is, sounds really exciting. And if you do have any questions about that, we've got Greg from City Power on the call today who'll be able to answer those. And the third project is a slightly different one. It's led by the Energy Innovation Cooperative in partnership with Mondo, Totally Renewable Phillip Island and Bass Coast Shire Council. And that will deliver a community battery trial co-opting part of a non-network solution battery, which is being built in the AusNet network on Phillip Island. This project plans to trial a virtual storage product for local customers underpinned by Mondo's UB energy management platform. And so, another really exciting project that we're really happy to support. So that's the end of my presentation. If you do have any questions about the projects that are being supported under the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative or just the Victorian Government's work in this area, please feel free to get in contact with our team. The best contact email is just neighbourhood.batteries@delp.vic.gov.au. I'm going to hand over to Chris now to talk about the Yarra Energy Foundation's project.
Thank you, Kieran. I hope that you can see this. Great, so thank you, Sam, Kieran and Tim, and I also want to acknowledge the custodians of the land from which I speak here, the Wurundjeri people. And I also want to thank our partners in this project, without whom we couldn't do it. So, and I'll tell you a bit more about our partners in a moment. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the Solar Sponge project. It is a project that aims to deploy community batteries across the City Power network. So basically, central Melbourne, inner suburbs. The way this is structured is with a different type of ownership. So it's a third-party owned. It's not owned by an electricity distributor or a retailer. And I will tell you a bit more about that in a moment. This project aims to deliver services such as storage and supply, so storing local energy whenever it is available and supplying it during peak demand. It will also provide network support services to reduce the constraints that may be experienced in the area where the battery is installed. And it will also trade on the electricity market. So those are some of the main features. Let me tell you a bit about the partners who are involved here. So we have come together, and the first three partners are ourselves, City Power, and ANU's Battery Storage and Grid Integration Program have come together to, number one, demonstrate the commercial viability of a battery system like the solar sponge. In other words, proving that it is possible to run a battery system like this that is economically viable while delivering the expected benefits to the community and to the network. But the second objective is to build on this trial to deploy more units across the City Power network, and therefore allow more people to benefit from its capabilities. YEF has the lead role on the project with project management. We work very closely with our partners, City Power, for example, in planning and working on the technical side of how it will actually operate on the network, working very closely with ANU's BizGip group on developing the software that will be running on this battery platform, but also more strategically planning of the broader project, tapping their tremendous knowledge and expertise in the area of community batteries and receiving their advice on this project. But they're also undertaking a lot of research related to both the technical aspects and the social aspects. So the project will benefit tremendously from our connection with the BizKip group at ANU. Our fourth partner is the City of Yarra, also working very closely with them. For example, this session is an example of that. And the overall community engagement as we get closer to the installation of a battery system. But last but not least is the DELP department of the Victorian government that's providing the funding to allow the trial to become a reality, but is also facilitating the knowledge sharing among the projects that were successful with the NBI grant scheme and beyond. So I think we're very lucky here in Victoria to have this authority helping us because I think Victoria is very well placed for having community batteries across the state. So let me tell you a bit about what is the value that community batteries bring to community members based on our particular business model. So first and foremost, the reason that you would want to have one of our community batteries in a solar sponge in your neighborhood is that it enables more solar to be installed and more solar energy to be exported. That's the main reason that you would want it. The way we go about it is that we make it available to everyone in the neighborhood, whether you are a solar customer, a non-solar customer, whether you're a small business, a renter. Basically, the battery is there to supply. It sources local energy during the day and remotely on cloudy days. So when the sun is shining locally, we can absorb all that energy that's coming in, basically soaking the sponge. And when it's cloudy, we can still charge the battery because the renewable content during the day is much higher in Australia than it is at night. So therefore, when we supply at night, we have a higher content than it would otherwise be. It's different in other countries, but in Australia, the sun-soaked country, we have so much of that, and we have a lot of wind too. There is no cost for customers to sign on. There is even a discount that we pass on. And very importantly, we don't change anything to feed-in tariffs for solar customers. So whatever is in place continues on. So there's no change to that. The way it works is that the battery charges up during the day. At night, it discharges to the whole local voltage network that it is connected to. And then at the end of the month, those customers that have signed up to the battery will receive a prorated discount for their consumption during the peak time in the evening. That's our default way of billing out the energy, but there could be other ways that we could do it as we engage with the local community. And as the battery is absorbing all this energy, it means that more solar installations can happen, more exports can happen, and most of all, we don't need to upgrade the network. And that eventually has the advantage of reducing cost to all consumers, not just the consumers in that particular part of the network. So how do you subscribe? Well, it's very simple. First, you check that your property is connected to the same cable in the street that your property is connected to. Then once that is clear, you can sign up through a retailer. So there will be some participating retailers would be able to sign up to the battery. Excuse me, Tim.
Sorry, Chris. I think we just lost your connection there for the last 20 seconds or so, if you're able to just recap.
Okay. Maybe it's the wind here. That's a renewable source. So I was just saying that it's very easy to sign on to the battery. You check that the property is connected to the same part of the network where the battery is. You sign up through a retailer, and there will be some retailers that will participate in this battery scheme. And then you download the app that will tell you what the battery is doing, and you can start enjoying the energy. So now let me tell you a bit more about how it is actually working from a commercial standpoint. So our business model taps three main income streams. The first is our local supply. So we store solar energy as it comes in and provide local supply. So what I call local supply, I want to make the difference there between that and other projects that may be doing virtual storage services. Now, virtual storage is particularly suited to solar customers. So solar customers, instead of putting home batteries on their properties, they may sign up to a virtual storage system so a battery system that is in the neighborhood and that stores the energy for them, which they can access later on. In our case, we provide what we call local supply. So we basically have the battery charged up during the day, and then we discharge to everyone who is on the local network. And those that want to sign up would receive a discount from the supply of this battery. In addition to that, we provide services to the network so that we can relieve the constraint that may be existing in that exact part of the network. And lastly, we trade on the electricity market, and there is two types of services that we would offer. One is buying and selling electricity on the spot market. The electricity spot market works a little bit like the stock market in that the price goes up and down depending on demand, supply and demand. And the other service is, it's called frequency regulation support. So we basically help the frequency to remain. So the 50 hertz that is what makes up the electricity at your power point. Well, sometimes it goes too high or it goes a bit too low, and batteries are ideally suited to make sure that it comes back to where it's supposed to be. So that's another service. Now, I want to tell you a bit about the way that these batteries will be owned. So we've come up with what we call a hybrid ownership model. Here you can see the batteries that will be owned by a local entity. And that local entity can have as its owners both retail investors in the community and wholesale investors. And there would be another structure, that will allow wholesale investors to provide funding as well. What this means is that to pay for a battery, which may cost anywhere from say $200 to $350 or something $1,000, we can actually have local community members provide some of the funding required for it, and that can be backfilled by wholesale investment. In that way, we're able to deploy more rapidly units across the city power network. YEF's role here is to provide first feasibility studies to make sure that we are able to carry out the benefits that are expected, that it is financially viable. We then can also provide the delivery services, and that's what I'm doing. I'm the project manager for the trial system. And lastly, we can provide the operational support for these batteries, which means that if a community group would like to have a battery in their neighborhood, well, that is possible, and we can assist them all along the way. So there's no need for having all the expertise, the technical and commercial expertise to make it happen, or the infrastructure and the commercial relationships to be able to operate it in a profitable way. These same services can be offered to an independent project that has its own ownership structure, operating exactly the same way. I think that's all I had at this point, so I might leave it at that for any questions that may come up.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Chris, and Kieran and Tim as well. We do have some questions, but I thought it might be worth touching on some of the questions which came through the survey, which many people completed. There were some common themes, some common questions which came through the survey, and although they don't really represent concerns that project partners have, they are questions that have come from a few people. So the first one, Chris, and I'll throw to you, is around safety, and in particular batteries and fires, and how safe they are. And in a couple of questions, people referred to the fire maybe a month or so back at the battery in Geelong.
Yes, thank you, Sam. Safety is paramount in the selection of the battery system that we will be bringing to neighbourhoods. Most of these, well, all the, let's say, economically viable hardware systems tend to use lithium as one of the base materials. However, there are many different chemistries. Some are safer than others. And I think also what's been happening over the years is that these chemistries have gone through multiple generations. We're probably now at the 4th or 5th generation of lithium-ion battery systems. So there is a lot of knowledge about how to keep these systems safe. Also, there's a lot of understanding of what triggers a fire. It's what's called something that's called thermal runaway. And all battery systems are becoming a lot more sophisticated in monitoring this, and the fire extinguishing methods are now much better than they used to be. Of course, when something goes wrong is generally when you are trying to test it to its extreme, and that may possibly be what happened down in Geelong. Just two things that were not supposed to happen at the same time happened, but normally that wouldn't happen. But it's just the way you do stress testing to make sure that everything is absolutely safe. We would likewise be very cautious on the selection of the unit and also on the testing on it before it is allowed to go live in any neighborhood. Maybe I'll leave it at that. And I don't know if Kieran, you want to add anything to what I just said?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I guess I'll just add that Energy Safe Victoria are really interested in the safety aspect of neighbourhood scale batteries, and we'll be working closely with all the projects that have received funding through the MBI, including the Yarra Energy Foundation's project on the safety requirements of connecting to the network. And like Chris says, lithium-ion batteries have been around for a while. They are really common. We've got them all in our phones and in our computers, and while there is a risk there, it is very low risk, and we'll be making sure that all the projects do everything they can to minimise that risk. But for the most part, these projects are extremely safe, so there's not really much to worry about there.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Chris, and thanks very much, Kieran, as well. The next question is in relation to noise, and I guess specifically, how noisy is a community battery, and does this are there any health risks related to the noise, or any other health risks at all related to the battery? Human health risks, pardon me.
I can speak a little bit to the noise, and someone else might be able to jump in with the second part of that one, Sam. So our understanding is, well, one example from one particular battery hardware that we got as an example, quoted about 55 decibels when you're standing 1 meter from the battery unit. And to give you an idea, that is about the same noise level as a dishwasher, but it's significantly quieter than a vacuum cleaner, which is usually around the 70 decibels kind of range. It would depend on the unit, and some units also have sound dampening in their casing as well. And noise would be something that we would be consulting very closely with the local community on, to make sure that the battery did not, wasn't a concern in terms of noise pollution. So yeah, something that we're definitely aware of, and there are a number of different mechanisms that we can take to make sure that it's as quiet as possible. But in terms of the broader health impacts of batteries, I might throw to one of the other experts.
Yeah, maybe I can add a few things to the noise. First of all, the noise only happens when the battery is charging or discharging. So there is some what we call power electronics, which is the equipment that sits inside that is doing all the moving of energy back and forth. When it switches on, it has a bit of a sound, a bit of a whistling sound. In our case, the way we will run the battery is that it will only charge during the day and discharge during the evening peak. It's not going to be charging or discharging at night. So therefore, there wouldn't be any noise issues at night. And the other thing you might, for those of you who have or have been close to one of these home batteries, you'll notice that some of them are extremely silent. So it also very much depends on the battery manufacturer, what acoustic insulation has been implemented. So I would not see noise as being an issue. And when it comes to any health hazards, well, the only other thing that we haven't talked about is electromagnetic frequencies. Now, you cannot install an electrical appliance in Australia anywhere without it complying with very stringent standards of electromagnetic emissions, and therefore these batteries you could stand next to it, which all of the technicians and engineers do, and operate safely with them without any health hazards. And so every piece of equipment that goes out that's going to be used in or near the public goes through rigorous testing with electromagnetic frequencies. So again, I don't believe that there is anything to worry about.
Terrific, thanks, Chris. Does anyone have anything else to add, attesting to the safety, health, the safety in terms of health of batteries before we move on to other questions? Okay, the very last one that's come through the survey is in relation to property values and home insurance. So can a community battery have any possibly negative impacts on a person's property value, or can it negatively impact their home insurance in any way? Chris, could you speak to this?
Yeah, I cannot say that there is any impact on property value. I think if anything, with a community having installed a battery in their neighborhood, I think it bodes well for the ability of people to put more solar on their roofs, and therefore get a faster payback on that installation. I think also from a visual perspective, the way we are approaching it is that we would be working with each local community to see in what way they would like it to appear, whether they would like to have a screen in front of it, which could potentially become a landmark that they decide how it would look. And there may be other ways to paint, or in other ways decorate that area where a battery system is. So I think in many ways it's a community battery is a minor utility that is installed just as you would find other such ones around a neighborhood. And I believe that particularly over time, over the next 10 years, we will see the footprint reducing for the same amount of storage. So I suspect that there wouldn't be any impact from that standpoint. Don't know if maybe, Greg, you have any perspective on that with the projects that you are working on?
Yeah, so just on noise and safety, I guess, you know, safety is the highest priority. So that something we take into account, and we've had to do some work recently on our pole top sort of community-based projects, and we had independent fire experts review those designs and take on board their recommendations. And as Kieran said, working with the regulators, Energy Safe Victoria and also Fire Rescue Victoria, all the way down to how to manage, you know, potential incidents. So yeah, really highly engaged on that one. And in terms of noise, it's like any other asset. There will be some low-level hum from the assets, and we expect it to be, you know, similar to the assets already out there. However, we'll be taking into account those issues when we design the projects and deliver them, as Chris said.
Terrific, thanks, Greg. We'll move on now with questions which have come in from all of you in the audience. So thank you very much for posting those. And a reminder to post any questions that you have at all in the Q&A function, please, rather than the chat function. But we'll answer some questions kind of about community batteries broadly at first, and then we'll move into answering some questions about the trial project in the City of Yarra. But maybe the first question is for you, Chris. So does the battery only charge, or does a neighbourhood battery, community battery, only charge when there is excess solar? And if so, how is this measured?
No, so it charges every day. It charges when there is excess solar on the local network, and it charges also when it's cloudy. So why does it do that? Well, obviously, it is designed to absorb all the solar energy that's coming out on the network, and that may be, or generally is, the main cause of a constraint in the network. But on cloudy days, as I mentioned before, there is a much higher content of renewable energy in the overall grid. And so what we do is we charge from there. So that energy is then stored in the battery. And then when the peak time comes at night, then we're able to discharge that energy. And that's with a higher renewable content than there would have otherwise been. Also in that way, we make sure that in times of extreme peak, which happens generally, you know, on the late afternoon of hot summer days when the air conditioners are pumping, then no matter what has happened, we always have energy, and we can therefore reduce that peak.
Terrific, thanks, Chris. The next question comes from Mary, and she's asking whether community batteries can be used to charge electric vehicles. Perhaps over to you again, Chris.
Yeah, love that question. Yes is the answer. And in fact, that's what I see as being the evolution, that more and more as we put community batteries out there, we'll be able to connect charging stations to it. And we can therefore have the electric vehicles that may be purchased by apartment dwellers or people who don't have a driveway, to be able to connect in through the community battery to their property. Because thanks to our work with City Power, we're setting up the whole mechanism for how energy can actually be supplied to a whole network, like as we are starting out with this trial. And then eventually we can do it to specific dwellings. And therefore, we basically democratize the access to EV charging, and you can therefore, with the so-called feature of vehicle to grid, you would be able to use some charge you have in your EV to charge your home if it's an apartment, for example. So today, if you look at EV charging stations, they generally have a bigger battery somewhere where they buffer a lot of the energy required to provide fast charging to electric vehicles. So I think community batteries is just the first step in that direction.
Thank you. The next question comes from Ian, and he asks, how many annual tonnes of carbon would a typical neighbourhood battery avoid in comparison to the typical energy use for a neighbourhood? So what kind of percentage and kind of reduction are we looking at? What are the emissions saved, do we think, Chris?
Yeah, so this is a really good question, which we are working on very closely with ANU on. I don't know if Hedda, you are able to respond to this, or maybe Kieran?
I mean, it's a wonderful question, and I think it speaks to, you know, the range of kind of goals that community members have, and I think at the top of those goals is reduction in emissions from local neighbourhoods. So that's something that in my research I hear very, very consistently. So yeah, so it's not my specific area of research. That is Dr. Marnie Shaw, who's my colleague within the research program. She's going to be working on that exact question. And really, I think it's important to remember that this is really cutting edge technology. You know, we're leaders in Australia, actually. So it's the kind of research findings and the understandings of what this technology can actually do from a social perspective, from an economic perspective, from an environmental perspective. These are all really new questions, and they're yet to be answered. So the answer is we don't know, but we're working on it.
Thanks, Hedda. Does anyone else have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to hear everyone's perspectives on why it's such a hard question to answer, because when we talk about, you know, PV panels or wind farms, and you can kind of say, you know, they generate this amount of renewable energy, and you can kind of put in a basic calculation to say, you know, if this offsets X amount of brown coal supplied electricity, it would save X amount of emissions. But there's a lot of interesting system-wide changes that a battery introduces, which I think might be contributing to why this is actually a much harder question than it might seem on the surface. So, you know, how it enables more solar to be installed. So you can't really, I guess, without modeling, understand how a battery, in the way that it might relieve congestion in or constraints in the network, might enable percentage of solar to roll out over a number of years. Another good point that Dr. Marnie Shaw made in our last webinar was, you know, the embedded carbon in the production and transportation installation of the battery should also be counted in the environmental footprint and benefits that you get as well, because obviously you don't want a unit which is offsetting all of the environmental benefits in its production and installation. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to flag that it is a highly complex question across geography, like in terms of space, like in terms of systems, and also over time. So it's not quite as simple as an equation. But yeah, hopefully we get an answer on that soon.
I was going to make a comment as well, Tim, that I think Kieran referred to in our one of our example projects, 120,000 extra kilowatt hours of export that will be made available onto the grid. And so we see examples on the network where there's really high concentrations of solar, and there can be examples where that causes constraints for people to be able to export. So the way we look at that is that, you know, without facilitating that solar energy, it's effectively would be spilled. So we see these community batteries going in locations not only to manage load, but also to manage that reverse export problem. And so, you know, that's basically an opportunity to use that energy rather than waste it. And that in and of itself is displacing generation that would have to come somewhere else. So there's definitely a benefit. And if it's coming from solar energy, it's got zero emissions intensity, which is much less than the current average intensity of the grid. So it's making a benefit.
Thank you, everybody. We'll move on to more questions now. And again, Chris, this one may be for you. My apologies for directing so many at you. But James is wondering, do homeowners need to install any additional hardware to participate in a community battery program?
Definitely not in our program. It's very, very simple. It's basically signing up to the battery through a participating retailer. making sure that your property is on the same cable. And then there would be an app that you can download and you can follow what the battery is doing. But no, there's no additional hardware that's required. I know there are other projects out there that do require hardware. We're trying to make it as simple as possible, as easy as possible to make use of the battery, take advantage of it. So no.
Okay, thank you. The next question I think might be either for Greg or for Kieran. And the question comes from Karen, and she's wondering, how might community batteries work alongside the larger city-scale batteries planned for Melbourne?
Yeah, I can jump in and answer that one initially. I'm not sure exactly what which of the city scale batteries that you're referring to there. If that's the Power Melbourne batteries that have been announced by the Melbourne City Council, that's part of a project that the City Power through Greg are also going to be involved in as well, and that's also received some funding through the MBI. And I guess one of the things with the benefits that neighbourhood scale batteries do provide, and those, if I'm thinking of the right project there, those batteries are of a similar scale here. The benefits that they provide really are quite localised. So a number of projects across the NBI are looking at potentially installing a network of these batteries right across the grid. So yeah, there's nothing to sort of to stop them from both going ahead. I don't know, Greg, if you've got anything to add there.
I would just say that, yeah, I definitely see them as an example of community batteries. And I guess this whole program is sort of expanding the rollout of these sort of neighbourhood batteries and city-based batteries, which will be the kind of gap in the market at the moment. From you've got little batteries on people's homes, you've got mega batteries on the transmission network, and larger ones as well that are connected to high up in the voltage chain. So yeah, we see a real big opportunity for what I call medium scale batteries that can be distributed. And I would see that City of Melbourne one as an example of that, in the same way these YEF ones are and our own projects are as well.
Terrific, thank you, both of you. The next question I think could be answered by either Chris or perhaps Kieran as well. What is the typical time frame from an idea or an aspiration to having an actual functional battery, situated and working and providing energy? So yeah, how long does it take from the idea to making it happen?
Sure. So there is today there's a journey that begins by well, I think you need to have a community wanting to have a neighborhood battery, and you have to have made connections with the electricity distributor, in this case, City Power, as a starting point to see that this is possible, and then is to do a feasibility study, so a service that we will be offering actually. But that's the initial part of determining whether you can go ahead or not. Then it's about the implementation. And today, because this is brand new, cutting edge technology, as Hedda said, it's taking a little bit longer. So we're aiming for roughly a year, hopefully less, to be able to go from the submission to the NBI program to actually delivering a unit. But the first time is always the hardest, and the second time it's easier. And we are aiming to have over 200 of these units over the next 7 years in the City Power network. And that will be made possible because as you go, you'll be able to reduce more and more of the time. I think there is no problem with the hardware technology. Like there's ample supply availability of that. Well, I shouldn't say that actually, with supply chain issues that we're experiencing with COVID at the moment. But disregarding that, yes, it's not the hardware. The second thing is the software that runs this. And we are developing for our project together with ANU, the software that will run this so that it's as efficient as possible. Once we have that platform in place, we overcome that. Then the third thing is key, is the actual engagement with the community, the planning approval that is required to be able to put a new piece of equipment in somewhere on communal land or private land. The more the community is involved and the council is involved, and the more we know what is going on early on, the shorter the time. You know, if today it's about a year, maybe in a few years' time, we're talking a few months to be able to get from idea to actually making it happen. But there's going to be a bit of a journey until we get to a few months.
I might just add there, I think partially Chris might be being a little bit optimistic with the year at the moment, just in terms of that he had done a fair bit of work before submitting that application earlier this year. So I think he will have been working on it for much more than a year by the time it does end up going ahead. But it really does come back to what he said about it. It's really new technology, and notwithstanding the potential supply issues at the moment caused by COVID, we really are expecting to see projects be able to get off the ground quicker in future. And in addition to the software that Chris mentioned they're developing is going to be open source, so it'll be available to other projects as well. And the Victorian government's also working with Heather and her team at ANU on developing neighbourhood battery guidelines and some resources that community groups in future will be able to use when sort of planning for neighbourhood batteries. And it's really is a key priority for the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative, is to share the lessons that we learn from these projects to make sure that that future projects are able to benefit from those, and the potential barriers to these batteries being installed are sort of minimised as much as possible.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks very much, Kieran, too. The next question comes from Damien, and perhaps it's a question for Greg. He's wondering if there's a minimum number of households required to make a community battery viable.
Yeah, so it's a good question. Thanks, Damien. It's more related to how you can arrange different revenue streams or benefit streams. So it's not so much related to how many households, but it's because the current pricing of batteries is still higher than it will be in the future, basically. If you can organise to target the battery to leverage multiple value streams, and that's how you can support the business case. So, for example, if there's a load constraint in the area, if there are emerging voltage constraints, and that typically occurs where you've got really high concentrations of solar in a localised area, and if you can make the battery part of a larger fleet so it can be traded for other market services in the NEM, then all of those things go towards building up the business case to offset the costs. So it's not so much how many customers are there. And obviously the bigger the battery, the more energy it can store. So yeah, I don't think I've given you I've answered the question, but it's a combination of all those factors. But the good thing is we expect battery prices to fall, so in the future, the business case will be easier to get over to make it economic.
Thanks, Greg. Chris, Gerardo we're just coming back to an answer that you gave previously about the battery and somebody's house being on the same cable. Could you explain a little, please, in more detail what that actually means?
Sure. So the way electricity distribution network is built is that you have a high voltage coming in, and then there are devices called transformers that take that down to eventually the electricity that you know at your power point, which is 230 volts. And so to get to that, generally, in particularly urbanized areas like the city power network, there will be a transformer somewhere, also called the distribution substation, that will have on the upstream side of that transformer, will have a high voltage. It could be 6,600 volts or 11,000 or 22,000 volts. And on the downstream side of that transformer is the 230 volts. Actually, it's 400 volts on 3 different cables. So if you look up in your street for overhead lines, you'll generally see at least 3 cables at the top. Actually, it may be 2 levels, but you will see several cables. And your property if you look at the box, the junction box that sits on your property, you'll see there's a cable that goes to one of those cables in the street. So that tells you, oh, all right, I'm connected to what's here in the street. And then you can go to the location where the battery is, and you can see whether the battery is connecting to it as well. Now, if you're connecting to one of those three cables and your neighbor is connected to another one, it's still the same cable, I should say cables. They all three go to the community battery, and the community battery is supplying across those three cables, whether you're on one, the second, or on the third. So therefore, that the current will be flowing into your 230 volts power points exactly in the same way, no matter which cable you're connected to of those that are sitting there in the street on the poles. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you. Karen has a question about the life cycle of batteries. And could someone give some information to Karen, please, about the end of life recovery and costs, please? I'm not sure if Greg is best placed, or Kieran, perhaps.
Look, I'll make a comment, and it's a good question. It's something that we sort of hear quite often in these sorts of forums. So I guess what I'd say is we're starting to see across the supply chain examples of where people are recycling batteries. I don't know, Chris has seen that as well. So, we expect as we see more of these that that will become more and more prominent. And like any asset on our network, we manage and steward assets over a really long period of time. And that sort of like includes their construction, operation, management, and then ultimately disposal. So yeah, we see these batteries sort of having a 10 to 15 year life, and we're starting to see the recycling supply chain emerge, and we expect that to continue.
Yeah, I'll just add that it is a really sort of developing a new area, and I expect that by the time that the sort of initial neighbourhood battery projects are reaching the end of their lifetime, we will have a really robust recycling industry across both solar panels and batteries. But there's already a lot of exciting stuff happening in this area. I mean, one of the things that was quite exciting about Yarra Energy Foundation's proposal, and they might not be able to go through with this, I don't think, anymore. But Chris, I don't know if you just want to briefly mention about the Relectrify batteries and the way that some companies are already looking at sort of recycling batteries. Or repurposing them more is probably a better word, but
yeah, sure. They're a very impressive company. They had an excellent idea. They take batteries out of Nissan Leaf vehicles, electric vehicles, so used batteries, and then they have a very nifty technology that actually allows to reuse them and produce a lot of energy. So they basically inject new life into existing storage modules that are used in electric vehicles. They're not the only ones. There are others around the world that are doing the same thing. And there is also some of the big car manufacturers are looking at how you can actually get into this circular economy of being able to recycle a lot of the components that come back into and the materials and the chemistry to be able to build new units. All of that is happening at the same time. It's actually a very exciting area to be in from a technological standpoint, because there is so much innovation happening right now. And in a few years' time, we're going to see new chemistries coming out. In fact, I see here in Australia, there's a lot of science going into commercialization of new ways of using existing chemistries to reduce cost, make it more accessible, smaller footprints. Yeah, we're just going to see an enormous amount of innovation coming in. And because the environment is at the top of many people's agenda, I think those that come out with the technical solution that can also reduce its environmental impact through circular economy will definitely have a greater chance. So stay tuned for all that is coming out.
Thanks very much. I think we might move now into some questions that are specifically about the community battery trial in Yarra. And the first question is from Brian, and he's wondering, what is the timeline to install the first community battery in Yarra?
Okay, sounds like that's a question for me. So we would like to install the community battery by June next year. That's what we're aiming for. As I've mentioned before, there are many different factors that need to come together for that to happen. And the most important thing is that the community wants this to happen, and we have a full agreement on how it's going to happen. As part of our application to the NBI, we selected the top of our short list of locations that we think would be very suitable. But it's very important to us that we are engaging with that community to make sure that people are on board, that they want this, that they see that this is the right thing for them. There is, I guess, unfortunately for Greg, there's quite a few constraints that we could actually address with community batteries. This would be an ideal location, but there are other locations too. And if for some reason we do not choose to go ahead with that particular location, the ones that are on the short list are likely to be candidates anyway, were we to go ahead with that first location. So I think it's really the pipeline, building the pipeline of locations for that. But the short answer is we're hoping before June next year. That's what we're targeting within our schedule. But it'll also depend on as I alluded to before, there are some constraints in the supply chain that otherwise we probably wouldn't have, that we also need to address. I don't know if anyone wants to make any other comments on timeliness of delivery.
We might move to the next question then, and I think this will be a question for Hedda. What is the best way to involve the community in the community battery project?
Look, that's a great question. I think exactly what is happening now is a really good way to start, which is to kind of have conversations with people really early, be upfront about what the technology is, what the business model is, the different ways that people can get involved. And, you know, I've been really impressed by how the Yarra City Council and Yarra Energy Foundation and others involved have been doing this really important work. So I think early engagement is, you know, absolutely key and critical. And I think people will have a lot of questions and continue to have questions as they kind of digest this initial, you know, first piece of round of information, if you like, and talk to one another. And there's a real sort of learning curve. I think in the audience we have some solar owners, and they, I'm sure, will be able to agree with this and to tell other non-solar owners that when you start to kind of participate in the energy system in this way through understanding the technology and what it does and how it works, you know, there's a really steep learning curve there, and a lot of people love it and delight in it and get a lot of joy and satisfaction and feel really empowered, and other people don't. Other people are bored with that kind of level of technical detail and are not that interested. So I think, you know, the challenge for Yarra Energy Foundation and for this project is to really make sure that that they can meet the information needs of people who have a very sophisticated understanding and those that don't, and provide a way for everybody to engage. So I think that's what I'm seeing. So I think it's really positive.
I wonder if I can add to that, and actually maybe circle back to the question of how long does it take to make something happen. At YEF, Yarra Energy Foundation, we really are sharing everything that we are doing along the way, and we do that on purpose. As Kieran said before, we're putting the software that we're running batteries into the public domain for anyone to be able to leverage. What we would like to do is to reduce the barriers for people to come in and make it happen, so that as the community is coming together and coming to understand whether this makes sense for them, that the ability to actually make it happen is much greater than it has been to date. And what Kieran and his colleagues are doing at NBI is great, because part of their mission is to do the knowledge sharing. So I would say that over the coming year, there will be so much information available and so many people who will have learned from this, that hopefully it will be much easier to get people on board. People will have heard a lot about it, thought about it, come to some of their own conclusions, come together as a group, wanting to make something happen. And then there are tools available. There are people to ask questions. There may be funding that they could possibly get for an initial feasibility trial, a feasibility study. All of this hopefully will come together, and at YEF, we're doing the best we can to make the learnings of our project available to everyone who would like to do something like this.
Yeah, one thing, sorry, Tim, just quickly. One of the things that really impressed us with the NBI applications was the number of local councils that had done a lot of thinking in this area already and were really supportive. And I wouldn't be at all surprised in terms of getting communities on board if we're seeing in a year or two's time, you know, a lot of demand from places if they haven't got the neighbourhood battery project sort of on the go already, sort of saying how come our community doesn't have one, and sort of, you know, starting to hassle their elected officials. So yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we do see really within the next couple of years a significant demand from local communities for these batteries.
Yeah, and I think Kieran, just anecdotally from our experience since we announced this project, we've had a lot of people from all parts of Victoria and outside of Victoria as well, I think, saying, you know, how can we get started on a battery in our neighbourhood or in our community? And that's so encouraging. I just wanted to link back to the community engagement aspect. I know we're coming towards the end of this session, but I really wanted to emphasize the community's inputs is absolutely fundamental to the success of this project. We are relying on all of your questions, all of your enthusiasm to help us to drive this and make this a success. In short, we won't be able to do this unless the community indicates that they're supporting this kind of future, really. We're trying to initiate broader scale change across the electricity network. And the fantastic thing about community batteries is that they provide new avenues for communities themselves to be involved in energy. And that's really, really interesting. And it's a fantastic opportunity. So I did want to just say thank you to everyone who has filled out the survey so far and who's contributed to the project. It's all making a difference. It's helping us shape the information that we provide to people. It's helped shape this workshop today, and it will shape each one that we do over the coming months as well. So yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that and just say thanks to everybody who has asked questions today. We've had a lot of engagement, which has been fantastic.
I think because we started a couple of minutes late, we might have time for just a couple more quick questions, if that's okay. The next one just asked very specifically, how will residents or interested residents be invited or informed more about the trial? Basically, you know, how can people get involved and know more? Perhaps Tim?
Yeah, sure. So definitely encourage you to visit our website. We will be regularly updating the FAQs. Let me just bring that up on the screen so you can see it. Just give me 1 second.
So while Tim is doing that, I'd like to say that our website is a fantastic source of information about what we are doing, but also generally about what's happening around. There's lots of great documents there, and I really advise you to go and have a look at our website and find the community battery section of that. There's a lot of useful information for our project and more generally.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and in terms of if you have any other questions that weren't answered today, please get in touch. You can email me directly if you like. I'll just put my email in the chat. But yeah, please reach out anytime if you have any questions that we haven't covered. We'd love to hear from you. Chris and I are also going to be online for a completely open drop-in session this Tuesday from 8 o'clock in the morning till 9:30 for anyone and everyone. You don't have to make a booking. You can just drop in, have a chat with us, talk through any other questions you might have about the project. And yeah, we'll be announcing more sessions and more drop-in sessions, I hope, as well, in the coming months.
And Tim, how do people find out how to get to the drop-in session?
Good question. Visit the website, so www.yef.org.au, and you can check out our events page there. The details are all on the website.
Terrific. Thank you, both of you. And I think we'll finish with one last question, which I think is probably best directed to Hedda, and that's about, how do we understand and quantify the benefits of a community battery to the community?
Yeah, look, that's a brilliant question, and something that's really struck me from watching the questions is that people participating in this event already have quite a strong understanding or quite a deep understanding of community batteries, and they've heard of other models in other places, and so there's there's a lot of questions that they have regarding this specific model, and it to some extent is a little bit confusing that there are so many different kind of options options available. And sorry, I've completely lost my train of thought from your actual question, Sam.
No, that's okay. The question was just about how do we quantify or really understand the benefits to the community? Because we hear so much, but how do we know?
Yeah,
really?
no, that's a really good question, and I guess the point that I was getting to with my long ramble about, yes, there's lots of different models, is that that's a really big piece of work that Marnie and I are working on with other researchers within our program, is to actually develop an impact assessment methodology so that and this is going to be really helpful for DOLB, but also for people in the community to have an understanding of, well, what are the various impacts that these batteries could have, and what's the methodology of how we can measure them. And then we'll be actually doing some of that work in the coming years, Marnie and I and others, to be able to actually measure those impacts. And so we can come back and we can say, well, this particular model has these kinds of impacts. This is what that, that looks like. And this other model will have a different range of impacts. And we can sort of put all the models side by side and actually get a sense of, as a community, what are your priorities? And so which model might work best for you?
That's so exciting, Hedda, because you can imagine that kind of research will underpin or could underpin a rollout of, batteries across a community, really, couldn't you? All right, so we are a little bit past the 3:15 finish time, and my apologies for everyone for going a little bit over. We'll wrap it up here, but I'd like to remind you about Chris and Tim's drop-in session. So it's the 14th of September, which is that Tuesday, Tim?
Yeah, this Tuesday.
Yep. Tuesday morning. Yep, sorry. Tuesday, the 14th of September. It's from 8 till 9:30 in the morning. It's an online session. The information about the session is in the follow-up email, which you'll receive post this webinar. For any additional information about community batteries just in general, or this City of Yarra community battery trial, you can check the frequently asked questions list on the YEF website, which is www.yef.org.au. You can be in touch with Tim. Tim's email address will be included in the email that you get following this webinar. And of course, you can email any questions that you have which you don't find on the frequently asked questions, or if you're not able to attend the drop-in session, sorry.
Can I just say, Sam, I just had to scan through all the questions I would have loved to answer, but we don't have time for.
Yeah.
Please do look at the frequently asked questions section. We'll go through those questions that you have asked and bring together the most common questions so that you can find what you're looking for.
That's great, Chris. So you'll keep updating the frequently asked questions. Yep.
Definitely.
Terrific, thanks. So yeah, so with that, firstly, I'd like to thank everybody who came along today, our audience. It's a Saturday afternoon. I know many of you, will be at home with your families and doing other things as well. But thanks for tuning in and showing an interest in community batteries and this particular battery trial in Yarra. We really appreciate you joining us.